I'd like to begin tonight with a phrase from the Pali script. It's ehi passiko. And it's a phrase that I've always loved because the meaning is come and see for yourself. And my sense is on all authentic paths, spiritual paths, transformational paths, you just can't simply listen and believe what you're told. The only way the path comes alive is if you're then checking it out, if you're bringing your attention to your own experience and sensing, okay, how does this work? If you're experimenting. So in a way, I, as a teacher, become kind of like the welcome doormat, like saying, hey, welcome, but you have to walk through the door. It's, it's not my words, it's your experience of things. So ehi passiko really speaks about investigation. And that's going to be our theme tonight, which is how do we take these minds of ours and investigate our experience in a way that really reveals truth, that shows us what reality is. Okay? It's in the Buddhist tradition, it's described as one of the factors of enlightenment, investigation. Because really it's this quality of interest that takes the light of awareness and shines it on the moment to show us what's going on. And what we find, if we really start noticing, is that we're usually in a kind of familiar cocoon of thoughts and a familiar set of reactions. I often call it a kind of a trance, a habituated trance, and it blocks the kind of presence and insight that's possible. So investigation helps to shake us out of our habitualness. You might be in a habitual thought pattern, and being able to make an inquiry, ask a kind of question that redirects your attention to the present moment, shakes you up. It kind of breaks the patterning some. So that's what we'll be exploring. Because what I've noticed when people come and work with me individually at retreats, when we have interviews or write emails about what's going on for them, what often strikes me is not just the problem I'm running into, I'm struggling with this addiction or this parenting problem or intimacy with my partner, or how to deal with, my own insecurities at work. Or it's not what's presenting, there's a kind of despair because it keeps repeating itself. And so what I experience is that sense of that we can lose our confidence and get really almost despairing when we sense, God, I've been doing that since I was 18, that same habit pattern. So what we find is that our trance gets sustained, and it's because we really haven't investigated what's going on. If you're suffering, it's because you're believing untrue thoughts and beliefs, and you haven't investigated in a way that would release them. There's a phrase that history repeats itself, which is good because most people don't really pay attention the first time anyway, But you get the truth in that. So I think of investigation as a way of deepening presence, that we take the interest in our mind and we deepen presence that way. And a traditional metaphor that's really useful for me is just to imagine we're living our life, and it's like we're living in this dark room, and because we can't see, we keep bumping into the same furniture over and over again. And we might come to this idea that, the bad furniture is in one area of the room, so we never go over there. And then we live with these ideas about what's really going on, but it's just a dark room. And so, inquiry, I'll use both words, inquiry, investigation, is shining the light of attention on this room, on our own mind, on our own heart. And as we do that, we find we can start actually shining that light of awareness on each other too, and see more clearly, who's there? So in the bigger picture, light dissolves trance. The more we investigate, the more we see, the less we're caught up in the repeating patterns. I'd like to name out loud the thing that is kind of behind the scenes, which is it really takes a commitment, because it means pausing when we're in that tumbling forward of activity, when we think we're on our way somewhere else. It's this willingness to pause and be with what's uncomfortable and take a look. So it takes a commitment. And the most basic training, if you start sensing, okay, I want to learn how to investigate my life, the most basic element of the training is this practice of being able to wake up out of this incessant inner dialogue we're in. We are addicted to our thoughts. There's rarely space between them. And this isn't a diatribe against thought, because thoughts are part of what makes us exquisitely unique and human and able to communicate, and they can serve all sorts of healing and spiritual awakening. And we spend a lot of moments lost in a trance of thinking. And I sometimes, talk about it as this is like channels of a TV station that just go from one to the other randomly in our mind. And how many of them are Discovery Channel? Not that many. So, and a lot of them are very fear-based, anxious about this, worried about that, planning that, very self-concerned. So the first level of commitment is, can we train some to step outside of this continuous pattern going on in our brain so we can actually look into what's here? I sometimes think of it like a plane flying and they're going through clouds, and when you're inside a cloud, you can't see the rest of the sky. But as soon as the plane exits the cloud, you can see the cloud and other clouds and the whole big picture. So when you pause, and when you step out of the thoughts, you can get that a thought is just a thought, it's not reality. That's the first commitment. And the reason we commit ourselves is because we start getting it that when we're having a hard time, it's because our minds are fixated in a certain kind of theme of thinking, and it's creating certain feelings in our body, which are creating more thoughts, and we're just caught in it. And sometimes in a way that's really crippling. The story I love to share, and I do every now and then, you might remember it on this theme, has a couple in Michigan who are trying to take a vacation. They want to go to Florida because it's been a really long, cold winter. And they're going to go to the same hotel where they had their honeymoon, but because of work, they have to leave on different days. So he goes down on a Thursday, and she's going to go down on a Friday. So he goes down, he checks into his hotel, and they have computers there. So he decides to send an email to his wife. And so this is what he says. He sends the email, but he doesn't realize that he had one letter wrong in the address, so he sends it to the wrong address. Meanwhile, somewhere in Houston, a woman has just returned home from her husband's funeral. And he had been a minister, and he had been called home to glory following a sudden heart attack. Okay, so he's gone, she's at home. The widow decides to check her email, seeing what kind of messages have come from relatives and friends. And then after reading the first email, she faints. Her son runs in to see what happens, and this is what he sees on the computer screen. To my loving wife, subject, I've arrived. Date, the 20th of September, 2012. I know you're surprised to hear from me. They have computers here now, and you're allowed to send emails to your loved ones. I've just arrived and been checked in. I see that everything has been prepared for your arrival tomorrow. Looking forward to seeing you then. Hope your journey is as uneventful as mine was. P.S. Sure is hot down here. So if we don't investigate, if we take our thoughts as real, we can get in trouble, right? Now, the thoughts that we take as real that cause the most pain and suffering, the most deep layer of uninvestigated thoughts, are the ones that are our own self-concept. That we each walk around with a story about ourselves, about who we are and how others see us and what else we should be doing and how we're falling short, and we're constantly rerunning those stories. So we're caught in this whole idea of ourselves that really blocks a larger truth. And this is kind of the hub of our theme tonight, that if we're living in the story of who I am, and it's a limiting story, we're going to have all the tendencies to look at you and see a limited you. And we're going to be living in a world of me and you out there that's really fraught with insecurity and blame and a lack of intimacy and understanding. So investigating our self-concept, seeing how it's keeping us small, not only affects us, but affects all our relationships. It actually creates a whole mood in a culture. This is Pema Chodron. She says, being preoccupied with our self-image, really believing in it, is like being deaf and blind. It's like standing in the middle of a vast field of wildflowers with a black hood over our heads. It's like coming upon a tree of singing birds while wearing earplugs. So again, it's this moving around in trance, the uninvestigated mind that keeps us small and separate from each other. The other thing to mention in terms of investigation is that we have to be willing to be uncertain, which isn't something we're real comfortable with. In our culture, and especially you can see it, for anybody that wants to be in power, you have to project certainty. I know the answer, and I've got it right. And investigating when you think you already know is not good for science, and it's not good for understanding social issues, and it's not good for understanding our own mind. So you can sense that when there's an arrogance, a kind of certainty, people are not open to what's really there. They're not open to the mystery. The world is not the way we imagine. So there's a kind of attitude of openness. One woman wrote, my ancestors were lost in the desert for 40 years, because even back then, men were too proud to ask for directions. So part of this investigating mind that I'm talking about is putting aside certainty. And it's in the Zen tradition called don't know mind. One of my favorite poets and writers, John O'Donohue, very simply says, I would love to live like a river flows, carried by the surprise of its own unfolding. So what motivates us? What might motivate you as you leave tonight to say, okay, I want to pause more and look more deeply, is really a love of truth. That there is something in us, and it's very intrinsic to us, that's kind of saying, so what is this all about? I mean, what's really real? Who am I really? Who are you? What matters? Really wants to know in a deep way. For investigation to be real investigation, it's turning the light of awareness to what's happening in this moment. Okay? So you might just to get a taste, why don't we pause right here. And let the pause be an invitation just to relax a little bit. Take a breath that's conscious. And the inquiry, the question is, what is happening inside you right now? What's the most predominant or compelling experience you're aware of? There's no right answer. Just, what is it? What's going on? Just this moment. And keep paying attention and just wonder what happens when the question is dropped in. If you're just sitting there and meditating and all of a sudden there's this question, well, what's really happening right now? What's the effect on your consciousness? Okay, opening your eyes when you'd like. So the intention with wise investigation is very straightforward. It's to arouse energy and to intensify the light of presence. That you can just be sitting and have the intention to be mindful, but when you ask a question, what's really happening? You can feel that presence intensifies. Okay? So a little bit on what wise investigation is not. And the first thing is that it's not any mental process that takes us away from presence is not wise investigation. So if you're figuring out things, it's not wise investigation. You know, we have a tendency to always be figuring out, like, I'm feeling this way because of a really bad experience in college, and that's happened because much younger I really felt like I wasn't a special person. And, you know, that's not wise investigation. That might be useful for some forms of psychotherapy, but the investigation that reveals truth, that's liberating, is investigating what's happening in the present moment. Okay? Wise investigation is not problem solving. You know, we're not trying to figure out how to get more things done or repair a broken printer or whatever we're trying to fix. It's not that either. Okay? And it's not a moment of disengaging and stepping back. You know, there's a book called Zen and the Art of Reading All the Books about Zen. You know, some of you might have heard of. So it's not this kind of thing where, okay, I'm just going to investigate and I'm the observer removed. Investigation needs to be embodied. Does that make sense to you when I say that, an embodied investigation? We're sensing the moment and really sensing how the moment is unfolding itself in this body and this life. Direct contact. So I'd like to look more closely, and we'll take how we investigate and look at it in 3 domains. And if we have time, I usually am overambitious, so we'll see. But one of the domains is when we're in an emotional trance, when we're stuck with emotional suffering. How can we shine the light of attention in a way that helps to dissolve some of the reactivity and the identification that's there? The second domain, with each other. How does wise investigation help to serve more understanding, more intimacy, more connectedness? Okay? And then the third area is how can we use wise investigation to really look into the deepest expression of our true nature, into awareness itself. Okay, so we'll start with emotional healing and see where we go with that. And many of you are familiar with RAIN, the acronym I often use in teaching how to bring a wise attention to the moment. R for RAIN is recognize, the A is allow. So the beginning of RAIN is what's happening here. Recognize and allow it. Then the I, investigate, deepen the attention. So you begin to unpack, okay, so what's happening right now? What's happening in my mind? What's happening in my heart? What's happening in my body? Okay, so we begin to really check out. Now, the whole deal with investigation in RAIN is it has to be with an intimate attention. You can't investigate if you're at the same time harshly judging what you're seeing, right? And that doesn't work. I mean, imagine you have a child that comes home from school and they're really upset about something that happened at school, and you say, and you're asking the question, well, tell me what's going on. And if you're saying, so what happened? Tell me what happened. You look really upset. It's not going to bring forward the kind of caring. It's not going to create a safe environment. So it's the same thing with in. That we need to be able to investigate our own experience and communicate a quality of intimate attention. It goes hand in hand. You can't investigate if there's judgment. Truth will not come forward. So I'll give you a couple of examples. One example I thought I'd share with you a couple of years ago, a young man I was working with, he had just gotten out of graduate school. He was working for a nonprofit environmental group with a really very bright group of people. He was the new kid on the block, and he felt he himself, very bright, together, articulate young man. He felt so out of his league that he'd go to the weekly staff meetings where they'd be doing presentations on one particular thing they'd been researching, and they'd be doing some brainstorming on their, what they were going to do for their campaign for that. And he just got befuddled. He could not speak. His heart got, really pounding and tight, and his stomach was gripped. And so he had a really, he was floundering, and he was embarrassed about himself. So we did a little bit of RAIN together. And when we got to the R and the A was, okay, I'm insecure. This is real insecurity coming up. Recognize it. Okay, let it be there. Now, the A doesn't mean you like it. You're creating a pause. You're saying, for this moment, I'm going to let this be here so I can investigate. The allowing lets you deepen your attention. So for him, investigating, we started saying, okay, so what's going on? The belief, because I often will say, what are you believing? If it spirals into too much conceptual thought, we drop it. But often, when you sense a core belief, like something's wrong with me, I'll always fail, I'll never be loved, that kind of thing, then we come into the body. How do you experience that in your body? For him, it was the belief was that they'll see that I'm inferior and they'll reject me. Now, I'm sure a lot of us can relate to that kind of core sense that if somebody sees that we're deficient, they'll reject us. So he was getting in touch with something pretty core. So I invited him to feel where it was living in his body. And he could feel the fear, this kind of tight pressure in his chest and his throat, and a kind of a shame, hollow gut feeling in his gut. And I continued the inquiry, well, what's it like to live with this? He said he feels like a kind of disconnected and like a very familiar sense of being very young and not okay. Then asked him to investigate and sense from the perspective of the fear, what did it need? What did the fear need? And the response surprised him. Because again, remember that when we ask these questions, we're not going in with the idea of what we think we know. He's really asked the fear, what do you need? And the fear place, rather than saying, I need to feel like, of course I'm good enough, or that I'm safe, or everybody will love me, it simply said that I'm accepted. That it's okay that I'm here. In other words, its fear did not want to be rejected. So that became his practice, because he, had been so upset that he had fear in him. His fear was saying, don't make me wrong, it's okay, I'm here. So that his practice was every time he'd get anxious, he'd recognize it, and in some way he'd send a message inside. It's okay that you're here. And just recognizing and giving space to the fear created some more space in his consciousness. He started realizing he could feel afraid, but he could also remember that he was on a very fast learning track. Well, it really helps to remember something like that. And he could feel fear, but also sense that, he had a lot of friends that were kind of in that situation, insecure because they didn't have a job at all, that kind of thing. He was afraid, but he could remember in some way that things keep changing. So it was very, very powerful for him because it allowed his natural intelligence to shine more. Having a little space around the fear actually relaxed him. More humor, more ease. Most basically, by investigating, there was a shift in his sense of identity. He went from the feeling of the new kid on the block who's insecure to this kind of awareness that was present and responding to his inner life and the people around him. In other words, his sense of identity enlarged. He wasn't caught in the trance of fearful, insecure person. And this is the key. This transformation in identity, in who we think we are, is the key to freedom. So that's the N of rain, when we're no longer identified with a small sense of self, not identified. The N of rain is we're back to our natural wholeness or awareness. So what we find is that for him, he could then ask a question, well, is that tongue-tied person at these meetings really who I am? And of course he realized they weren't. I mean, that was, when you get big enough, you can realize that that small identity that you're feeling bad about isn't who you are. I'll often ask myself that question. It's a very powerful inquiry. Is this person, this week has been one of those weeks that's been very, very squeezed and busy. It's one of those ironies that I'm leading up to a retreat where we're, opening into presence moment after moment, and I'm speeding and racing towards our retreat trying to get everything done like a lot of other people. So I keep saying to myself, is this speedy, uptight person who I am? And it's some waves that are expressing that are part of my being, but it certainly is not the definition. That makes all the difference. So maybe one of the metaphors that's helpful on this part is that there are parts of our being that to investigate, they're like these shy, timid creatures that are in the shadow of the woods, our shame and our fear and our loneliness, and they don't want to come out. They don't want to come out into the meadow, into the light. So if our attitude, as I mentioned before, is one of sincere interest, if we have that fear part and we say, what do you need? What's it like to be you? What's going on? What's the belief? And we're asking out of a really sincere and kind place, those creatures will reveal themselves. And once revealed, we're no longer hooked. It's the parts of our psyche that are unconscious, that are not in the light of awareness, that keep our identity small. Does that resonate for you? Yeah. Investigation brings it into the light. So we can see the fears and the wants and the cravings, but they no longer dominate our sense of who we are. This happened for a woman that, because many times the creatures in the dark are a very, very painful belief about ourselves. And for one woman, the core belief was basically that I'll never be in an intimate relationship. I'll never be able to be close with anyone. And I know as I say this, for those listening that are here, and I know many of you listening from podcasts and so on, this is a very deep and pervasive fear. I'll never be able to be intimate with anyone. And so we, again, did a process of investigation, mindful investigation, using the RAIN template. Okay, so recognize and allow, okay, living in this belief and in pain, suffering. So we started exploring the belief, and I asked her a question that I ask a lot of times, which is, how does it feel in your body to have this belief? I'll never be intimate with anyone. And at first there was a layer of fear, I'll always be alone and what that meant. And then there was a layer of kind of shame of this is a reflection that I'm just flawed, undesirable. I mean, that, just to be honest, as she felt undesirable as a woman. And then underneath that was this profound grief of separation, just this pure grief. And so she's feeling these layers of what she's living with and how long she's been moving through life with these feelings of fear and shame and loss, and how that's ended up defining and shaping her experience. It's been her filter for so long. And as she felt that, there was a real deep sense of compassion for herself. When she really got how many moments of her life she was living with these layers of pain, that's how the belief was there. So compassion was added to it. And so that was when I could begin to ask her a very, very powerful question, which is, what would your life be like if you didn't believe this story? What would your life be like if you didn't believe this belief? And I'd like to invite you to, when you have a chance, try it on. If there's something you're believing, like I'll always fail at something, I'll never be loved, or I'll never be close to anyone, or, it's like, what would our life be like if we weren't believing that? There's a similar question. Who would you be if you didn't believe it? Who would you be if you didn't believe that you could never be intimate with anyone? For her, when I asked that question, there wasn't an answer, but what was there was a sense of aliveness and a sense of kind of a dynamic, creative openness. But no answer, like who would I be? Just this aliveness would be here. And it was a little scary, but it was filled with possibility. So again, the purpose of investigation is that we begin to shine the light of awareness on what we normally run away from. And if we really can hold our attention, those places that we were so identified with, the identification dissolves some. We start seeing who's there. We start seeing the life that can live through us.